I'm going to start with the most important tip, and I'm going to save the most effective for last because it's also the most ethically questionable, borderline illegal, depending on who you talk to. My name's Eddie, aka Driver Ed, an internationally known and locally disrespected Uber and Lyft driver for honestly, almost 10 years now, off and on. And these tips and tricks that I'm about to share with you have helped me earn over $30 an hour consistently over that time, despite the ups and downs that Uber and Lyft have gone through. And at times, even earning as high as $80 an hour over the course of an entire shift. And that's on super rare occasions. The first and most important thing that every Uber and Lyft driver needs to employ is, please, for the love of God, do not accept every trip.
This is so crucial to making more money as an Uber driver that I actually just posted an entire video dedicated just to this. And if you don't understand why this is a must, please check that video out for your own good. And look at the comments section full of veteran drivers sharing their own acceptance rate, many of which are below 10%. But the short of it is that Uber operates by sending out the lowest offers first, hoping drivers accept it. And if nobody accepts it, then they offer drivers more money. It's quite literally auctioning off fares to the lowest bidder. So the more you accept, the lower your pay will be, guaranteed. I've had my acceptance rate as low as 8% before, and the only reason it's higher now is because I was working in New Jersey, and in that state, for some crazy reason, you can't see upfront pricing or where your rider's going. So my strategy in situations like that is to only accept rides that have a short pickup time because you don't get paid to drive to the pickup. And then when I do accept a ride, I call the rider and I ask them where they're going. If I don't want to take that trip, if I don't like their destination, then I cancel, which is why my cancellation rate is higher than usual as well. Point is, accepting low-paying offers just because they're the only offers that Uber is giving you is not a good strategy in the long run because you can literally lose money doing this gig. And I'm not going to lie to you, the opportunities to earn with this app are getting fewer and further in between.
That's why tip number 2 sounds like a joke, but it's not. And that's, don't work Uber. Well, more specifically, be very mindful of the times that you do choose to drive and mindful of the times that you choose to not drive. I saw one of those alpha business influencers talking about how people are just lazy and, he heard Uber drivers can make $30 an hour. So if he was an Uber driver, all we'd have to do is work 70 hours a week and then he would make, 6 figures every year. And the reason Uber drivers aren't making 6 figures a year is because they're too lazy. And it's like, yeah, you can definitely make $30 an hour driving Uber during certain times of the week. In my market, Monday morning, you get a lot of business, airport runs. Friday and Saturday night, people are active. Sometimes weekend days, they're hit or miss. And, if there's a holiday or sports event, like you get a good amount of people moving around and you can make some good money. But there are other times where if you're working, say, a Wednesday afternoon, you could sit there for 2 hours and get 0 rides. Uber earnings are not linear. It's more like a scatter plot. And you got to figure out in your market what times work best to earn money.
And in the same vein, you should be conscious of things like traffic patterns or road closures or weather's a big one. A lot of times rain or snow isn't going to keep people from going out on a Friday or Saturday night, but it might force them to call an Uber when they would otherwise walk. Meanwhile, there'll be less drivers on the road because any driver who is uncomfortable driving in those conditions will take the night off.
But if you're comfortable with that and you have a car fit for that weather, then, there's not going to be that many other drivers on the road. And I want to reiterate, this is strictly coming from a make more money mindset, from a safety mindset. Stay the hell off the road. Before kids, I was out there no matter what. But, as I've gotten older, I see wet leaves on a dark road and I'm done for the night. So yeah, I've turned into someone who's way more risk adverse than I like to admit. But at the same time, maybe it's in my best interest to not treat my 2012 Prius like an all-terrain vehicle. Tip number 3, location is everything. This is probably the most important one that I want to show you my strategy for. So I hope you check out that video. But basically, you need to find areas in your market that not only give good rides, but also give good rides to good locations. It'll make more sense when you see it in practice. But in my area, there are 2, maybe 3 specific locations where there's like a central area with a handful of bars that people go to. And that turns into rides to bar, ride home, and round we go. And tip number 4 is kind of piggybacking off the importance of giving rides to good locations, or at least more specifically, how to avoid rides that go to bad locations. And that's why, tip number 4, I will never get a ride from the airport. I'll probably get some slack from other drivers for this, but hear me out. I'll take a ride to the airport for sure. But when I'm there, it never made any sense to me to wait in the airport queue, have to drive all the way around the complex to the pickup area, and then potentially get stuck with a ride going God knows where. You got to remember, the airport is the one place where there's a queue, so basically a line. And so if you don't accept a ride because you don't like the pay or the destination where they're going, you're going to lose your place in line and go to the back of it, which, being that the customer is at the airport, you literally have no idea where they might want to go. So odds are the offer you get is not going to be a good one. Not to mention, there's typically a crazy fee that every city imposes on rides when you pick them up from the airport. So yeah, it never made any sense to me to wait 20, 30, 40 minutes for a ride that you have no idea where you're going to go or how much it's going to pay, where I can just leave the airport and in 5 minutes I'm back in Delco and have my choice of whether or not I want to accept a ride, knowing where the ride's going to go and how much it's going to be. So we got the big ones: acceptance rate, timing, and location. Now these next tips I swear by, but not only do I have a feeling I'm going to get some slack from other drivers for, I'll be the first to admit that the ethics of some of these tips are a bit questionable. So do with them what you will.
And that said, I think it'd be a good time to thank this video's sponsor, Redtiger dash cams, because you should never drive for Uber or Lyft without a quality dash camera that records outside and inside the vehicle as a way to protect yourself from all the things that could go wrong. Redtiger's F17 Elite not only does that, but is the first and only dash camera available that can record in cabin, in color, even at night. And if you purchase it from their official website, link in the description, it comes with a free 18-month warranty. But use the code EddieDriver, and depending on the sale they're running, you could get this camera for just a little more than $200, which is an absolutely insane value.
Tip number 5 doesn't get any moral pushback for, but I do know there's a bit of a split in the driver community about it, and that is short trips. Only accept short trips. And I don't mean distance, I mean time. And there's 2 reasons as to why. The more trips you give, the more opportunities for tips. And nothing will affect your bottom dollar more than tips. If I give a 5-minute ride for the minimum fare, which is a little more than $4, that's $40 an hour. And if someone just tips $1, which these days most people tip at least 2 or 3 if they're going to tip, but if they just tip $1, that boosts my earnings by 25% for a 5-minute trip. And if you can do that multiple times an hour, you can understand how it adds up, especially that one time when someone tips $5 or $10. And then as far as surges, you got to think you're either on a surge, so you can give the trip and hopefully come back to that surge and get another trip on the surge, or you're giving a trip off the surge, but it's quick enough that you drop them off and then you can check the map again to see if the surge is there. If I'm on a 40-minute trip, how many surge opportunities have I missed in that 40-minute window? I'll never know. And a little bonus to approaching driving Uber this way is that mitigate your risk with passengers. If there's somebody who's creepy or sick or angry, you only got to deal with them for a short amount of time. I mean, it's just simple logic. The chances of something happening are lower the shorter the ride. Tip number 6, and this I think veteran drivers will agree with and new drivers will kind of be like, wait a second. And that is, do not prioritize the customer. I'm not saying be rude or mean or anything like that. All I'm saying is you got to recognize that being an exceptional driver does not equal exceptional pay. You're an independent contractor that can't set your own rates or build a book of business. So nothing you do on a ride will make it so that you earn more, at least through the Uber app, but we'll get to that later. So with that in mind, you got to decide for yourself what you think is worth the effort to put in. Me personally, you'll never catch me stocking my car with gum and candy and water bottles or anything like that. I tried that once and I didn't see any return in the form of tips or anything like that. All I got was litter in my back seat and half-drank water bottles that they left in my car. Do I keep my car clean? Sure, but by no means am I going to the car wash every single day to make it immaculate. If somebody's late coming out for the ride and I have the opportunity to cancel, I'm going to cancel. And you can sit there and say, well, that's not nice. Can't you say that about the rider? Why is it on me to be nice to the rider? Shouldn't the rider be nice to me and allow me to cancel? That sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Well, it also sounds ridiculous to not cancel on them. They're making you wait. They're costing you money. And then potentially when the rider comes out, say, oh, I could just drive you for cash. Not saying I would do that, but more on that approach later. You got to be real entrepreneurial. And honestly, that's the hardest part for most people when it comes to this gig. Uber has taken a bunch of people with a W-2 mindset of do what I'm supposed to do and hope my employer rewards me for it, and instead demands of them to operate in an independent contractor world. And that's why a lot of people don't make money. And all that said, I'm not encouraging you to be cold-hearted. I'm just recognizing that it's hard to think like a business, but still be human. When I'm working Uber and my rider is a drunk 20-year-old kid who gets out of my car and stumbles on the way into his dorm on a cold night and he's laying on the pavement and there's no one else around, and my next trip is a $30 surge that's already lined up, and I'm afraid if I don't go right away, they might cancel. It's like, what do I do? The business decision is to leave the drunk 20-year-old on the pavement to fend for himself and go get my next ride. But I think we can all agree the right thing to do is to go help the kid. The point I'm trying to make is there are decisions you're going to have to make with your bottom line in mind. And then there are decisions you'll have to make that will sacrifice your bottom line, but it's the right thing to do. The way I operate is that as long as my driver isn't left in a compromising situation, then I've done my part. So yeah, I helped the kid on the pavement, but I was pretty freaking pissed about it. Of course, the $30 surge canceled. Tip number 7, do not make stops unless you're getting paid for it. I will never accept a request that comes with multiple stops. If a rider wants to make a stop at, say, Wawa on the way home and get a hoagie, I tell them that, sorry, it kills my hourly rate and I'll stop, but you'll have to throw me some extra cash. I mean, you got to think, by stopping and waiting for an indefinite period of time, you're not only not getting paid for that waiting, but you're also missing opportunities for other rides. And again, I've learned this the hard way. Somebody says they'll run into Wawa real quick and it turns into a 15, 20-minute wait. And to me, it's simple. If they aren't willing to pay for a stop, why should I be willing to lose money doing it? I'm not the one who wants to stop. Time is money with this gig, and somebody is paying for that waiting. Why should it be the driver? Tip number 8, don't pay for the rider's mistakes. If they spill in your car, report it. If they throw up in your car, report it. If they put the wrong address in and you don't want to go to the new one, don't. If they leave an item in your car and it's not worth it to return it, make them pick it up. They got Uber, they can Uber to you. Man, I remember one time this girl left something in my car and she called me asking me to return it. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't have the time to drive to drop it off. She lived like 45 minutes away. I told her that she could Uber to me to get it, and she asked me if Uber would pay for the ride. I said no. And I'll never forget what she said, verbatim. She says, so because I made a mistake, I have to pay for it? Yes, that's what personal responsibility is. And again, this is the mindset you have to have if you want to maximize your earnings. And again, that's why it can be hard. I always think of this one time, this poor little girl, she must have been 6 at most, who's from a very poor part of Philadelphia, was in my car with her grandfather, and she had an accident in my back seat. On one hand, the business thing to do is report it. And on the other hand, I had a hard time thinking I was going to report this poor family to Uber and cause them to get charged extra on account of a 6-year-old. And I was feeling like this before I had kids. If I was that much of a pansy then, imagine me now. The point is, you got to recognize that the riders aren't your responsibility, but that doesn't mean that you have to lose all humanity in your interaction with them. Again, what that looks like for each individual driver, no judgment. For me, what it comes down to is the time and money it would cost me. For the girl who left the item in the car, an hour and a half round trip for the $15 Uber would give me, no shot I'm doing that. But as far as the 6-year-old, there was a gas station right where I dropped her off, so 3 minutes to clean up a wet back seat and not kicking a poor 6-year-old when she's down, that I can live with. Tip number 9, upsell the passenger. If you have something in your car that you can sell to your riders, that can turn into an extra 20, 50, $100 a shift. I've heard of drivers that use Uber as a way to connect with passengers for their main business. Me personally, I wrote a book about the craziest and funny stories that ever happened while driving Uber. I keep it in the passenger seat back, and when a rider asks, what's the craziest thing that ever happened while Ubering, which they always do, it's a really easy pitch. There was one time I remember I took an Uber where a guy kept a cooler in there. He was selling water and soft pretzels and chips and other things riders might want. As cliche as it sounds, have some cheap umbrellas or ponchos when it's raining out to give the passenger. This is probably the hardest tip in practice because, like anything in sales, the majority of times you're not going to convert. But if you find something that works, it's an easy way to maximize your time with a potential customer. And now for this last tip, like I said, it's a bit questionable and it is not one that I would do without a dash camera.
And at the risk of bothering this video's sponsor, I'm going to be honest with you. Any dash camera is better than no dash camera to a certain extent. You're going to want to make sure that you can get one that can record in the car, and don't waste your money on a super cheap dash camera. Otherwise, you'll end up with footage that looks like this, which is basically useless. For those wondering, the dash camera I'm currently recommending is the F17 Elite because it is the only camera that can record in color in the car even at night. And as I mentioned earlier, with the code EddieDriver, depending on the current sale Redtiger is running, you can get this camera for just over $200, which is an absolute steal, being that it's usually priced around $400. But the main point is you're going to absolutely need a dash camera if you're going to employ the most effective way to make more money as an Uber or Lyft driver. And that's
tip number 10, build a book of business. Now, take this tip with a grain of salt because technically speaking, I'm not sure the legality of it, and if Uber finds out about it, they'll kick you off of the app. My biggest concern about doing this personally is that if something were to happen during that ride, you wouldn't be covered by Uber's commercial insurance. So if you don't have your own commercial insurance, you can run into some problems with that. That's why I never take rides off of the Uber app. But if I did, I imagine what would work well is, say the rider took too long to come out and you canceled on them, then instead of them ordering another Uber, just tell them you'll drive them for cash. Or perhaps you drive a group of people to the bar and you're having a good time and they like you and you say, hey, take my number. If you want to ride home, I can take you for less than what you would pay for Uber. It's a win-win. They pay less and you get more. There's obviously a bunch of different ways to do this, but obviously you should never do this with someone you feel uncomfortable with or unsafe with. And again, and I'm being serious about this. This is like, you could fall into some trouble doing this, especially if you got into an accident. God forbid the rider makes a claim or, says something happened. Like, all of this stuff isn't tracked on the app. So the fact that they're still in your car without being connected with Uber, that right there is a red flag, for anybody investigating the incident. So I'm being serious. I am not encouraging anyone to do this at all, but I am encouraging you that if you are going to do it, you need to have a dash camera. Otherwise, you're just asking for trouble. At the end of the day, if you can make connections with people in your area and they become a bit of like a regular customer, you can make a lot of money that way. And it also makes your job a lot easier because you know who you're picking up.
I know some drivers that make it their MO to build a book of business. And to me, that's a little too much risk for my blood. Unless, of course, you have the proper insurance for it. Let me know what you guys think. And as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you at the next one.